Okay. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to come and listen to this talk. I'm really excited to share this information with you. I've never taught on this topic before, but it's basically, I'll be sharing a framework through which I have learned about herbalism and plant knowledge for the last 30 years, and through which I actually shape the classes that I teach and the book I wrote. Everything is kind of based on this for me. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. I wanted to give you a little bit of background. So I said I've been doing this for 30 years. I literally, in high school, got into herbs, and throughout college and my young adult life, I just kept studying and studying. I've studied in 3 different countries at university level, and a lot of scientific studies as well as traditional medicine studies and personal experience. I've done plant meditations. I've just had so many different amazing opportunities to learn about plants in different ways that I find it really fundamental for me to have that diverse way of learning and to not just learn from a book, for example, or through one different way. So what I'm going to do today or tonight for you guys, I'm on the West Coast, is I'm going to share something that's been gifted to my culture, me as a white person, from Native American culture, from the Lakota Native American groups. And I'm doing this with great respect. I actually contacted a friend of mine who's a professor with a process of respect and reciprocity tied to the uplifting of Indigenous people. I don't just want to use this framework without explaining that I do it with great respect. So anyway, I did want to tell you that, and to tell you that I'm not presenting on this topic as an expert of Native American ideology or the Four Directions philosophy or the Lakota traditions. However, I am really grateful to be able to use this framework and this ideology of looking at life in order to better understand herbology and my development as an herbalist and as a teacher. And I want to tell you as well that my teacher, Paul Bergner, first introduced me to this idea of looking at herbalism through the lens of the Four Directions. And he only talked on it for about 5 minutes during one class I took with his. So I've developed this a lot on my own and put a lot of time and energy into figuring out what it means for me. So that's a little bit of the background of what we're going to be talking about. So jumping into it, the Lakota Four Directions is a really beautiful philosophy originating from Native American traditions. And you can see in the top right, that is the medicine wheel, which is also called sacred hoop. And the circle of that represents the sacred circle of life. The cross represents the sun and humankind's sacred paths. And the wheel has to vary by culture, but universally it does the same thing. It honors the core belief that all living things on earth are interconnected and that all things on earth are living. And I really love this because I work with gemstone therapy as well. So we're including everything in this philosophy as being interconnected and living. And everything in the world comes from the Four Directions. I'll tell you much more about what the Four Directions mean and how that means anything to you as someone that uses plant medicine and uses essential oils. I hope that it can help you with your journey forward and when introducing people to essential oil therapy and natural health. But the Four Directions are deeply also embedded in symbolism. There's so many layers of this I'm not going to touch on at all tonight, but just know that the colors and meanings vary between individual Indigenous groups as well as individual Lakota groups or bands. And the philosophy and the symbol is subjective and can be individual. So there are a lot of different versions of the medicine wheel, and they mean different things to different people. Also, we want to know if there's statistical significance, because this will help us to qualify whether the result is due to chance or some interesting factor, right? So most studies will give you a number. This is called the p-value, and it'll be usually, I'll show it on the next page, but it's something that scientists use to represent the statistical significance, okay? And if it falls below a certain level, then the result is statistically significant. So we want the lower the number, the better. And so a p-value of more than 0.05 is significant, but less than 0.1 is viewed as highly statistically significant. So just as what I keep in mind is just the lower the number, the better when you're looking at research. And also, finally, make sure to check whether it's a private, like corporation that's doing the research, but they may have ulterior motives, I don't know, but a lot of times they may. Or if it's organizational or academic, that does weigh into how reliable the information is. And some recommended sources: Medscape, PubMed, aromaticscience.com, AromaWeb. Those are all really good places to search for studies if you're into that kind of thing. And then here's just an example, one that I use for my e-course on how lavender essential oil helps to heal the perineum during episiotomy recovery. And you can see here, it says randomized control trial. So we know there's a control group. Here's the p-value of 0.001. That's really high. And this study resulted in lavender essential oil being used instead of povidone iodine as very, beneficial, statistically significant, that it was more beneficial than iodine for episiotomy care. So I thought that was really exciting when I was doing research for my book and my e-course to read something like this and see that it is a peer-reviewed, backed-up research study with a really good result. And then, of course, also you can see the details below there. It's good to understand that research is becoming more and more available and accessible. You can see how it's grown since 1944. Here's between 1944 and 2014. So that's good. We have science on our side there. And then everyone in this group has seen this list before, but we also use science to do testing on the natural plant medicine that we're using. So it's very beneficial in that regard as well, not just for research studies, but to keep things potent and pure and evaluate quality. I love this slide. This is one of my favorites from a class on emotions that I did years ago with a naturopathic friend of mine. And this is just an infrared thermography photograph of each of these different states of emotion. And you can see how, look at happiness is just glowing and warm, whereas, anger is warm, but it's more hot at the top of the body. There's a couple states that are really cold, like depression is really cold. Now, this is helpful for me using essential oils, because as an aromatherapist, I want to look at energetics as well sometimes. So cinnamon, for example, is really good for people with a depressed mood or depressed state. So is ginger. A lot of these warming oils are really great to diffuse in the winter to keep people feeling good and being motivated and not getting down. The same thing, where cooling things can be helpful for anger and anxiety and stuff that are more hot conditions. So I just thought that was a cool scientific framework we can look at things through. Then we're going to go on to the direction of the south. And you can see there at the bottom that I have represented by a drop of oil in someone's hand. And the south in the medicine wheel represents, well, first of all, the color red and summer, right? Heat, summer, abundance, joy, peace, strength, courage, innocence. Can be a peak of lifetime. There's understanding and ability in youth. And in the framework through which we're looking at studying herbology and aromatherapy tonight, we're going to be looking at it through personal experience, right? So this energy is all the personal experience. So we just went over science. Yes, we have all the research and the science to learn through, but we also have personal experience, and that's no less valuable than the science. This is so important, and this is often the place where people start. And a lot of you I know are teaching people how to use essential oils on a regular basis. And I'm sure you tell them to open up your bottles every day, to have them in your kitchen. I always tell people, have one in your purse, maybe learn one at a time and just make sure you use it throughout the day. So personal use is so important on this topic. And I think that we should also try not to have, an extractive mindset. So looking into the wild plants, don't look at these as how they can benefit you only, but have a relationship with the plant and bring them into your whole being. So some examples of this. I'm going to elaborate a little bit more, but uses for essential oils when you don't know how to use them yet, or when you're doing a new oil, it's really helpful to look through a book. You can listen to other people's testimonials or get advice from people, read case studies, read published and unpublished articles. They can be valuable as well when we're not just looking at science, but we're looking at people's experiences. And I think that those are all really good ways to do it. There's something called embodied learning, which is a principle in herbology that I've lived with for most of my adult life. And this is the idea that you should slow down when you're using plant medicine, especially for the first time when you're getting to know something. But slow down and use one plant or one essential oil, learn it mindfully, bring it through your body. So we all know when we get a new oil, like it's really nice to inhale it through your hands, put a drop in your hands and really have that experience in your bones, like have it sink into you, into the core of you, so that you really are mindful during it and are experiencing it. And I think that's something that we could do now. Like if you have an essential oil with you, you can just simply, like I actually just got my this oil today called Blue Lotus, and I've been playing with it all day, but I'm just trying to like really bring it into my awareness and just use it. So the whole point of personal experiences is that if you have a headache and you use an oil and it helps your headache, you're never going to forget that. You're going to learn this information. So I think it's really a good thing to keep in mind that there's so much value in that. So I mentioned testimonials. Here's just a few examples of what testimonials can look like. And they're usually other people's experiences. But as you get your own personal experiences and share those, that is a really good way to share this information with others, especially people you know well or you're speaking with in person. Here's an example of 50 drops of helichrysum and 8 ounces of lotion was applied to the back of her legs. And then here's 6 weeks after treatment. Now you can see this isn't a scientific study. Like obviously her pants are pulled down lower. It's not like a controlled environment really. There's no control group. They could have left one leg without treatment and the other would have been a better study if it was a study. But because it's just a testimonial, we can't expect there to be a lot of perfectionism in how it's conducted. But I still think there's a lot of value in these. This is one that I like a lot with essential oils and MRSA. And, I think it's just pretty amazing to see the amount of healing that can happen. I think this was with the oregano essential oil, but for between day 1 and 1 month later. Now, again, it would be more useful to have 2 different examples, one a control group without essential oils and one with essential oils, but it's still pretty incredible to see the kind of transition that came from. Okay, so now I want to go and talk about the West, which is instinct and intuition. And intuition is the ability to understand something immediately without using the cognitive, like processing part of your brain to understand it. And that's something everyone is capable of. And actually, I'm sorry, I skipped over the definition of West from the medicine wheel perspective. So I'm going to backtrack just a minute. So the West you can see is black. You can kind of think of this as the autumn time of year, time of death, the death of summer, the shedding of our skin, power, the end of things. There's finality in it. There's contemplativeness. But thinking about like going from what we just were in, which is summer, into this like time of dying back, all I can think of is introspection, right? Like intuition, instinct makes so much sense for me for this direction of West. And it's something that like right now it's winter time, but like the autumn and winter time are times when we're like pulling into ourselves more. I know I'm more into meditation and get more introverted. So back to what I was saying. So I was talking about instinct and intuition. So intuition is when you have the ability to understand something immediately without thinking about it. So we're basically using kind of our more perceptive feeling part of ourselves rather than our conscious reasoning, right? So everybody is capable of developing their intuition. Everybody has intuition. Sometimes I look at it like not something that's a special skill, but something that we can all develop to be a more finely tuned, sensitive sense that we have. I know our brains are incredible. I think we use something like 10% of our brains to take in the world. And when you think about intuition, look at all the different things that we take in and we don't realize we've taken in, we're not cognizant of. So it does make sense when we're in an intuitive state that we're not thinking with the cognitive parts of our brain, like the cerebral cortex. We are taking in information in a different way on a different level. And this is certainly something that's applicable to learning about natural medicine. There's also instinct, which is this innate sense. It's like typically a fixed pattern of behavior in animals in response to certain stimuli. So I think of this in medical terms as like, if you have a burn and you're like, oh no, I have a burn. Like, even if you don't know what aloe is, if you have a jar of aloe in front of you, you're going to scoop it and put it on the burn because you know innately, like instinctually, that it's calming and it's cooling. So that's really important to remember that we are animals on this earth and that we do have instincts for things. So I think what I'm trying to say is that using your instinct and intuition when applying, like learning to herbalism, like just remember to tap out of your cognitive brain and trust your insights into things, even if you haven't read them in a book already or heard them from someone else. So how do you think the indigenous people learned as well? Like when I was younger, before I'd really studied natural medicine and herbology, I always thought that it was just thousands of generations of trial and error. Like they'd pick a mushroom or they'd eat a plant and they would die and get sick and like not know what to eat, not know which ones to take. They found it by trial and error. But no, that's not the case. Actually, indigenous peoples who practice medicine that have been interviewed and studied in modern times have universally said, no, we got it through because the plants told us. The plants told us about their medicinal qualities. They had a kind of communication with the plants that they used for this understanding, and it's actually still available to us today. So again, I said no special skills are required. There's a perception in the Western culture and our culture that says that this is something to be rejected. Like this isn't as important as science. It's, woo-woo, or it's not real, it's in your head. But I don't believe that because I've had so many personal experiences and studied herbalism for so long. But I hope that we can all take a moment in a few minutes to try this, because this is something that I feel it just takes awareness, and it starts with what's around you. And I'm going to show you a little bit of a process for doing that. And then we can actually, do that together, take a few minutes just to see what happens when we do it. So here's kind of the different approaches you can take. Or actually, this is the different approaches you can take. Sorry, just a minute. Okay, so first what you want to do is, I'm going to equate my experience as I tell you about this, but choose an herb or a plant or an essential oil blend, preferably one you don't know well. So my example of that is when I was studying herbology with Matthew Wood, who's a really amazing herbalist, if you haven't heard of him. He was really into drop dosing of tinctures. So we had all these different herbal tinctures that didn't have labels on them, that had names on them. They just had numbers on them. And when he gave medical treatments, he would just give 1 or 2 drops. So he believes in like kind of micro dosing or homeopathic dosing of tinctures, which is really different. But he does that because he's had so much experience with just taking that substance in a small quantity and learning so much about it. So what he taught us to do was to put 1 drop of this tincture on our tongues, and then we would sit around a table, and just sit quietly and meditate and open up and clear our minds, be calm. We'd try to ask the plant. I always did it in my own head, or sometimes with my hands on my heart, but just ask the plant permission, for guidance, thank the plant for being available. You want to have some kind of gratitude, like relationship with the plant, which is ancient. This is what people have done for thousands of years, is to thank the plant and to give offerings to the plants that they're using medicinally. So it's a really good practice to continue, I think. Just a side note here, when I was doing a lot of wild crafting and things and other herbal classes, we left tobacco. That's a really common traditional thing to leave. Just like tobacco leaves, we would leave it over the plant that we wild crafted or took from nature. And it's just a really wonderful practice. Even if you're just doing it in your own head when you're smelling an oil or doing a tincture, just having that appreciation really means a lot to make this connection. So after having the tincture in our mouths, we would just connect with the plant and kind of note the connection. I remember feeling, and I often feel this, like energy maybe going up in my body or energy going down. Like I didn't always understand what I was feeling, but you really can just get into your body. You don't have to have any visions of anything or have something speak with you. It's okay if that happens, but a lot of people will just feel sensations. Maybe you'll feel something in your lungs or in your throat, or on your skin, or you might feel hot or cold. But just note these feelings and observe without analyzing things what occurs to you. Some people have thoughts pop into their head, like ear infection or something like that. So just listen to this. Again, this is something everyone is capable of doing, and it's really kind of fun. After you do that, you typically would share your experience with others, or then go on and research the plant, like find out what it was if you didn't know. Write down your observations, digest the information you've received, and when appropriate, like later on, you can use it for medicinal purposes. So like some of the plants I said I feel up energy from, like maybe if I'm tired, I can look at my notes or think back and be like, oh, that plant made me feel uplifted, right? So I'm going to try that now and actually experiment to see if I have more energy. So this is a more complex, sort of advanced way of learning about plant medicine, way more so than having personal experience, right? So everybody can kind of come in at their own level, but I do think that this would resonate with a lot of people. So if you want to try it now, we can do something that like every time a new oil blend comes out or I have a new oil, what I do is I don't read the ingredients on the blend if I don't already know, like sometimes I already know, but I will put a little bit of that oil in my hand, probably like on my chest, just depending on what it is. So I invite you to do this now. It can be one that you know really well or one that you don't know as well from your collection, but you can just put something on and then take the time to do proper like inhalation. My friend was telling me the other day that he really rubs the oils to heat them up when he inhales. And it actually really works. Like the whole room gets a diffuser when you give a little bit of friction to it. So you can just take a couple of breaths. Remember to thank the plant, ask for information. Wow. So, I mean, I'm only taking a few minutes. Sometimes we take longer, but for me, I just was using Blue Lotus and I felt swirling energy in my heart chakra and a lot of warmth. And I haven't really looked too much into what this oil is good for. I know a little bit about it, but like that's a keen observation that I'm going to remember. Did anybody that's listening try this? And can you share? Does anyone want to share what they experienced? I can't see anybody, so I'm not sure. Okay, well, I don't hear anybody talking, but I hope you'll try that when you have your own space and really like get to understand what that direction represents. Now I want to talk.
Stephanie, I was going to share, but I can't. I can't seem to get my video back on. I keep clicking it, and it's.
Maybe Steve can help you.
I'm not sure what I did, but I can tell you.
Okay, great.
Let's start my video. Did I close it? Maybe. No. I don't know what I did. Anyway, I did Japanese peppermint, and I put a couple of drops under my tongue, and then I did the friction rubbing, which is really cool. I hadn't thought about heating it up like that, but it did seem to give it a little bit different aroma. Mm-hmm. And when I closed my eyes and thanked the plant and asked if it had any wisdom or information to offer, what I guess felt or saw or experienced was sort of like like flames, like cool flames coming up from, where I was seated, going all the way up to the body, like fluttering of but white flames. So it was like cool flames.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And that
really
makes sense for that oil as well.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
So I probably have to sit longer to get more than that, but it was very visual.
Flames represent energies. I know it's heat as well, but it's energy. So sounds like a cooling energy, like a really cooling, strong energy, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it definitely felt, it wasn't heat, but I felt a warmth coming up with the flames, sort of like when you're staring at a fire and the flames are sort of licking up.
Nice.
And then I could feel them in my body.
That's very cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Does anybody else want to share anything? Well, just interrupt me if you come on later, anytime. Well, so I did that when there are like sets of oils that come out sometimes that are blends, and I have just intentionally not learned anything and written down, like done the meditations, taken more time than we just did, and then written down all my thoughts and then looked at the ingredients. And because, I have so much knowledge in my head about this already, I didn't want to influence my discovery process, but then just wrote down everything. And I can't believe like how profoundly accurate it can be about what you experience, but it also takes you to another level. And, keep in mind, like, this is all very individual. Like, one plant isn't going to give the same kind of information to one person as it will to another. There's a lot of diversity in how we perceive the world. And so this is not a picture of one of these herbalists that I quoted here, but I just put this picture in because I wanted to also extend this practice for you and have you know that you can do this with plants in nature. Like, I have gone on a lot of herbalist retreats and campouts and hikes, and they're really fun and wonderful way to connect with nature and learn these practices. But what we would do is we would identify, we would know like a lot of the plants in the environment we were spending time in, but we would go and sit down next to one of the plants that we wanted to get to know. And without damaging it, we would, sit and basically meditate. But meditate is just a word for calm your mind and be open, not be as analytical about things. So whatever way you can do this, where you just calm and relax next to a plant, just know it's ideal that you're either touching it or you're connecting with its energy somehow. It's not important to destroy it. I mentioned earlier having an extractive mindset. We don't want to look at the wild and think, how can I benefit for this? We can sit without taking anything and with just like making offerings and asking for knowledge. And that's just a beautiful way to experience plants in general. And that's a fun way. Like, if you love peppermint essential oil, for example, and you have peppermint in your garden, you'll get to know your essential oil better if you go and sit with your peppermint plant. Like, it's pretty cool. So I'm going to read a couple of quotes here. The first is by Cammie McBride, who's an herbalist, and she actually teaches direct knowing through an online course, and she's pretty cool. She's been doing this for a long time. She studied with Michael Moore, the herbalist in Bisbee, Arizona, and I've been to visit him and know him as well. He's passed away, but so she's just one of the amazing herbalists we have in the world. And she says, so the thing is, not everything the plants do has been written down. The plants are evolving just like we are. It is up to us to keep our herbal studies relevant and in present time through deep communication with plants themselves and learning how to listen to the plants as direct teachers. So exactly this idea of like gaining information as it's been done for thousands of years, through the plants directly. And then Kiva Rose is an herbalist I did an online class with. She lives outside of Gila, New Mexico, where I worked on a medicinal herb farm for years when I was in my 20s, for like 3 months when I was in my 20s. But I studied with her for years. She says, energetics and actions are not lists of correspondences and memorizable terms, but rather a mode of perception through our senses, a way of listening to the language of the plants with our bodies. So when she says energetics and actions, those are both herbal terms, but I think most people are familiar with either Ayurvedic herbal medicine or Chinese medicine. My background's in Western eclectic herbal medicine, but basically they all involve energetics, which is to say, if you're someone who has really dry skin and you could have run cold and you're thin, you're going to need a different herb for something like constipation than if you are someone who runs hot and, you're kind of like greasy or like have more watery constitution. So energetics is basically just like the opposite, somewhere in the spectrum between hot and cold, wet and dry. There's lots of different ways to measure it. But when I was talking about, doing the plant meditations and stuff, like energetics is something you feel. Like I felt warm before. I feel cold, like you felt cold with a Japanese peppermint. So this is something really kind of fun to pay attention to, is if you feel hot or cold, or suddenly your mouth is parched where it wasn't before, or maybe you feel more satisfied. But energetics are kind of fun to play around with in herbalism. Again, another kind of advanced skill. And then actions are just things like something is a diuretic, means it makes you pee. Something is anti-inflammatory, it helps with inflammation. That's just what actions are, those terms. And then one more, this is Stephen Berner, who is another amazing herbalist. He's a really good writer. I believe he passed away. He's written like 24 books, and he comes from a lineage of herbalists. So I think that's really interesting. He had like a grandmother who was a midwife, and then ancestors before that who were into herbology as well. But his quote is, "I am and always have been interested in the invisibles of life, those meanings and communications that touch us from the heart of earth and let us know that we are surrounded by more intelligence, mystery, and caring than our American culture admits of. How to re-inhabit our inner being with the world, how to sit in the council of all life as kin rather than dominators, and how to live sustainably on this earth that I love more than I know how to say." And just like a good message for having a relationship with the plants that's full of respect. Okay, so finally we have the energy from the north. And I'm going to tell you what the north represents first. So that's that top. I love this illustration I found on Canva. It's just, the herbs and flowers coming out of the book. And perfect for this because the north is winter. It's the color white. It can represent hardship, wasting, surviving, wisdom gained through stories told in winter, wisdom gained through the trials of life, cleansing, purifying, strengthening, and at its heart, traditional knowledge, which we translate into traditional herbalism, traditional medicine. So this is, again, like I'm talking about 4 different ways of learning about plants. The first was science, the yellow to the energy of the east. The one on the south was personal experience, experiences as a practitioner as well, using oils and things on other people. That's the energy of the south. And then to the west, it was instinct and intuition and, being quiet, plant meditations, direct knowledge. Now we have finally tradition, traditional wisdom, traditional practice. So important in this wheel, right? Everything, can you see how everything is so important and interconnected and gives you a more holistic look at this practice? So a couple examples of how we gain traditional wisdom. Ancient texts, definitely. Let's see, I have some dates here for the text. Okay, so the Chakara Samhita, I hope I'm pronouncing that somewhat correctly, was written in between 400 and 200 BCE. It's an Indian text and one of the oldest and most important ancient authoritative writings on Ayurveda. So I think that's probably got a lot of good information. I've never read that. I have read the middle one, The Yellow Emperor's Classic of Medicine. This is classic book in the traditional Chinese medicine canon of literature. It was written around 2600 BC. And then published over 350 years ago, Culpeper's Herbal, Complete Herbal, there on the right, remains one of the most complete listings of herbs and their uses in existence. Like, that's amazing to me that it's 350 years old and it still has that kind of status as a book. There's a couple other ones. There's one from China that's between 200 and 250 CE. I think that these are really valuable sources and there's a lot of wisdom in them. Obviously, these predate scientific research and things like that. But you'll see in a minute, we're coming around where most of the things we're reading about in the traditional texts have been proven by science. Something to point out, though, is there's been misinformation that comes from these kinds of texts. I'll give you an example. I think this comes from Culpeper's Herbal, but I couldn't actually find it in time to let you know for sure. But do you guys remember how people were saying don't use lavender essential oil or lavender the plant because it causes boys to grow breasts, like it has estrogen in it? The reason that was misclassified is because lavender is classified as an emmenagogue, and an emmenagogue means that it brings on menses. So people assumed that you should avoid that. And there was this really funny research study that was done with a product that's carrier, not the lavender in it, but the carrier was full of estrogen. And they just equated the product in the study with growing breasts and estrogen levels in young boys and men. And it was just completely wrong study, right? It was totally debunked. But the information about lavender being a emmenagogue came from these herbals. And sometimes some of the terminology is confused. Actually, sometimes people call emmenagogues abortifacients. So emmenagogue means brings on menses. Abortifacient means causes abortion. So there have been quite a number of herbs that have also been mislabeled as abortifacients. Now, that didn't happen in the original text, but when people duplicated the information, there came out all these warnings about don't use frankincense during pregnancy, don't use peppermint, don't use lavender, because all of those are emmenagogues, but they don't cause abortion. So one thing that I'm always having to tell people, they don't trust the oils because they think that they read online how dangerous, even Roman chamomile is dangerous during pregnancy, all these things, but it's really based on just incorrect translation of ancient texts being repeated on the internet and through blog articles from people who don't really dig in and learn the facts. And, understandably, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's hard to know what to repeat and what not to repeat. But in writing my book and my e-course, I got to the bottom every little thing like that and went back and found out what the truth behind it was. And you really can do that. You can look at newer research and see where things have been misunderstood in the past. But that can be a little bit of a danger with some of the older texts being mistranslated. Okay, and then another part of our traditional wisdom is called materia medica, or we can also have materia aromatica. Basically, materia medica is a Latin term from the history of pharmacy, and it's from ancient Rome, and it represents the body of collective knowledge about the therapeutic properties of any substance for healing, i.e. medicines. So basically, it's like our catalog of available medicines or available aromatics, right? The word materia is Latin for material and derived from mater, I think, meaning mother, and matrix, meaning vulva or womb. And I love that, being, professional and, expert in the birth community for women. I love that the materia medica, the word materia is derived from womb, and mother, because it is holding all of this information. You can see those drawings below. People spent their lifetimes, studying plants and illustrating them and sharing the information and the knowledge and passing that down. So, traditional wisdom is real. And I'm super grateful that in my studies, I've studied from lineages of very well-known celebrated herbalists who are from a line of other herbalists. So you can just trace back your teachers, throughout history when you study herbalism, and you pass down their insights and things like that. And it does feel to me like a womb, just a place to give birth and to hold information and life. And it's just such a beautiful etymology for the word. And then also, this is one of my favorite parts of all of this, and I saved the best for last because the science is kind of boring, and that's what we kicked off with. But I love this thing called the Doctrine of Signatures. I learned about this from Matthew Woods, who's one of my premier teachers that I studied with for a long time, studied advanced clinical herbalism with him. So this is basically a tool used by herbalists since ancient times, since the time of Plato. And the Doctrine of Signatures was around the world in pre-modern cultures on nearly every continent. Okay, and it's basically a philosophy that states that herbs resemble various parts of the body and can be used by herbalists to treat the ailments of those parts. I'm going to show you some demonstrations of this in a second. But basically, the plant will resemble the disease, the organ, or the person it will heal. I totally understand, after studying herbology for as long as I can, this makes so much sense to me. And, I also love quantum physics and just this, I'm a Reiki master teacher, just I've studied energy most of my life, even as a child. And I think that it makes sense that the shape would resemble the shape of the plant, the shape of the disease, the shape of the plant. It does make sense to me. because it's just matter, right, being created from energy, and there's going to be energy patterns, and it might be getting too far out there for some people, but it really does work, and it's a tradition that has been happening for, since ancient times. So I think something like that doesn't last as long if it has no real substance or value. And so Matthew Wood says, signatures provide a backbone of the intuitive approach to knowledge. Here are some examples. So lavender and lavender essential oil is beneficial for swelling. So you can see on the left demonstration of what swelling can look like. And then on the right, you see how round the lavender plants are in the field, how it resembles swelling, how, even though swelling can sometimes be more red than purple, the blue kind of represents stagnation. Swelling can represent stagnation, and, the red is the blood in the area. So purple, being a combination of red and blue, is perfect. And then just the shape of it is really representative of swelling to me. So that's one example. Tree-derived herbs and essential oils are beneficial for respiratory conditions. And some examples, there's so many more. I didn't really take time to go through like every, tree oil or tree plant, base plant, and to tell you, yes, this is good for respiration. But literally it's like almost anytime I'm in doubt, I just grab a tree for respiration. But we have eucalyptus, tea tree, laurel, and cypress are some examples. And you can see like how similar the shape of the tree is to the bronchial tubes, which are pictured on the left. And here we have resin-derived herbs and essential oils are beneficial for wounds. And someone had a bloody knee, and look how similar that is to the shape of the resin. That's myrrh on the right, and then on the bottom is frankincense. And keep in mind that the myrrh and the frankincense are hardened in these photographs. The myrrh looks like it might still be weeping, but when they're actually weeping, it looks even more like the wound. And with those oils and other resinous oils, you can actually, they're called like the herbal band-aid. You can actually put the oil, if it's therapeutic quality, like directly on the wound, and it kind of stops the bleeding usually, and will make a layer over the wound, just like a band-aid. So yeah, that's another just example of doctrine of signatures. And so finally, I'm wrapping up, and I want to make time for questions if there are any, but this is a quote from my book, and this is me kind of summarizing. The introduction of my book just in one page goes over what I just talked about tonight in much more simplistic terms, but just I wanted to create a framework before people read my book about where the information comes from, because I teach about pregnancy and infant care, and these things are so, like, it's such a vulnerable time of life. And I think people have a lot of doubts and a lot of questions, and don't trust, the internet search they do. They don't trust just everyone to tell them something's safe and not safe, because they're going to be moms, and they want to keep their baby safe. And it's just an innate quality that we have when we're giving birth and having babies. So I'm saying that because I felt really good about bringing not just one source of information like evidence-based research, for example, but bringing all four of these ways of knowing into creating these materials to really teach people how to use essential oils during maternity in such like a safe, holistic way, that it really feels important to me to pass this on to people. So here's a quote from my book. When information from each of the directions becomes balanced, the highest form of understanding occurs. For example, many traditional uses for plants that were derived from intuition and tested by personal experience have now been verified by research. Therefore, there is no one way of receiving knowledge that is more important than the other. And I don't know if Steve will show you, but this is my book and e-course. And I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen for Steve to take over now.
Yes. So, Stephanie, can you explain your e-course real quick too, just so everybody knows what the
Yeah, sure. So it was originally written to train birth professionals, nurse midwives and midwives, and I taught it live for a number of years, but it's basically like a 6-hour online training course, self-paced, with I talk about kind of the history of herbology, different applications, and then go into each stage of maternity, including, breastfeeding, infant care, transition stage of labor, like every stage, and talk about what applications are best. I have dosage charts. I have my top 18 oils that I recommend and how to use them. And it's just a lot of information. I've had, over 1,000 people take the course. I have almost 100% positive reviews for it. So I think it's a really good tool. And I do have CEU credits available for people if they want to take continuing education credits. So a lot of different people like chiropractors can qualify for that. Sometimes massage therapists, definitely people in the birth profession. And then it's also available in Spanish, both those things, as well as my book, in Italian and a couple other languages.
So I'm going to stop the video in case anybody has any targeted questions.
Okay.
Recording stopped.
They would like to ask. Does anybody have a question they have for Stephanie? Again, you can put it in the chat if you can't get your video on. I'm not sure, Carolyn, why I wasn't able to get your video on. I clicked it 3 times and it kept saying that it was connected.
Yeah, I have tried over and over. I was tempted to log out and try logging back in because it's never happened to me before, but I didn't want to miss anything.
Yeah, so I'm just curious. I clicked the button to ask you to start it. Is there a pop-up on your screen?
Yeah, it pops up, and when I click it, it goes away, and then I get a message that says, cannot start video, failed to start the video camera. Please select another camera in settings, but I don't have another camera in settings.
Okay.
It's the weirdest thing. I'm so sorry. But this has been wonderful. I studied years ago, it was right before I got pregnant with my first, so it was 22 years ago. I studied with Elliot Cowan, plant spirit medicine.
Oh, cool.
And I didn't get to finish that course because I got too pregnant to travel out to the desert in, near Mexico when I was living in San Diego. But it was very similar to the process that you described, and it just brought back some really great memories.
Oh,
so,
cool.
Yeah, wonderful information.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nobody else has. There's a little call. Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you. This
Great.
is the first time I've taught this, so I'm a little rusty at it. But if any of you think this is valuable and want to share it with your teams, or do another talk, I'm open to that. I'm just going to polish it up a little bit more, and hopefully people will find it useful.
So just so you know, everybody, that Stephanie's going to be doing a specific talk on pregnancy and essential oils, and that will be in February. So make sure you register for that. And then beyond that, we do have another call on Thursday with Steve Bear for strengths, and he's going to talk about how to basically create a authentic marketing plan with your strengths. So if you're able to, register for those events, and we'll see you Thursday.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie, very much.
Can I say one more thing real quick?
Oh, yeah.
I just want to, I think it's important for people to know that how my book is different than what's already out there. And I didn't talk about that very much, but I'm really passionate about getting this information to people. And what I found with sharing essential oils with people is that some women who are pregnant just don't, they're just really, really precautious, and they really want to know everything. And my book is so pro oil. It doesn't scare people away from oils or anything, but I do talk about how to adjust concentration if you're using them during labor or medicated birth. I do go into a lot of details that answer these questions that I get so much. And I think it really helps people who would otherwise say no oils at all, to feel like they're safe and to bring them in and then really start their family on this path to using them. So I just wanted to let you know it's pretty different than what else is out there. And I wanted to tell you how. So that's everything. And I appreciate you listening.
Awesome.
You should have waited until the recording was still on to say that.
Oh.
But we're good.
Well, I thought you were going to talk about my book. And stuff.
No. You did a great job with talking about your book and stuff. That's why I wanted you to cover the e-course. So
right. Okay. Cool.
So we're good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight, and we'll be in touch. And Stephanie, I will follow up with you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.